or laptop speaker, which is a little nauseating.
Yes.
Hello, all.
Hello, Rob.
Hi, Rob.
Looks like Meg has joined us. That's great.
We should have just taken with us. I think they didn't come. Video is empty.
Aaron.
Maybe if you're gonna be speaking more, you should just have the microphone coming.
I think that's a decent idea. Can you hear me?
Oh, no, let me mute my-
You mute your audio so you can't hear it.
It's not gonna be more.
Right.
It's not letting you mute your audio. Maybe you go into your like control panel on the lower right. It does look muted, doesn't it?
Down there. Yeah, that looks muted. It's so interesting.
Oh,
How about now? Can't hear it. Okay.
no, sorry.
Okay.
Let's see my call meeting order.
Well, that's a good question. So
Don't do it.
it is 3 o'clock. We've been working through some technical difficulties in our anchor location here. But I think we have the setup that we're gonna have for the time being, which is great. I think everyone is aware that we don't have Planning Commission Chair John Nepstad is not present, and neither is Vice Chair Jeff Niermeyer. So Polly, I wonder if you could provide a recommendation on who ought to chair this meeting.
Why doesn't the commission just should elect somebody? So, of the, you guys can decide amongst yourselves. That's usually how it's done.
Okay.
Maybe you want to do whoever's the most senior. I don't know who is the most senior, between Rob and Dave.
Rob, I think you got me.
Yep.
I might have never chaired a thing in my life, but I'll be the chair.
Oh, Rob, I'm looking forward to this. You got this. You just got
Okay, introduction from the chair. Hello, everyone. Has everyone reviewed the minutes from our last meeting?
Okay, first.
Rob, just call the meeting to order at 3:01.
We'll call the meeting to order, and hello to
3:01.
everyone who is available today. Now we can move on to the approval of minutes.
Yep.
Anybody have any objections or recommendations or corrections? Take that as a no. Do we is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I can make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. In a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I,
Beautiful. Number 3, Planning Commission roles and responsibilities. And we're going to listen to Meg Ryan. Is that correct?
I hope so.
Beautiful. Take it away.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. Nice to see you, Chris. I see him a little gray. Sorry, I've known Chris
Yeah,
for a while and I haven't seen him visually for a while, so a
yeah.
little different. Mayor, nice to see you. And I think I remember you, Rob, but I don't know if I've met Molly. I know Polly. I haven't met the other Chris and David, and I think I don't know you either. But so my name is Meg Ryan, and I work for the League of Cities of Town, of which you guys are a member. And I'm here to, I think, impart a couple of just things that you may or may not already know from your esteemed legal counsel. I'm sure has directed you in the right way. But I also just wanted to have a conversation with you. And I know we're missing the chair and the vice chair, but that's okay because you can just impart any tidbits of knowledge that you think are useful to them. I have a slideshow, but I kind of want to chat with you a little bit first. I think I have maybe like 30 or so minutes to kind of go over some concepts with you about state law. But I wanted to first just for David, I guess, and who else is it? Rob and Maren. So I know, Rob, you've been on a while. David and Maren, how long have you guys been on the Planning Commission?
I'm gonna wager a guess of like 7 or 8 years, maybe.
Okay.
I think I've seen your presentation at least once or twice.
And I'm pretty new. I think it's been 2 years now, but only a few meetings since then. So I'm still learning.
So let me up, and there he is. There's the senior statesman who just logged in, John. He's not going to let us see his face. Long time no see, John. So let me just ask you guys, what do you think let me ask you, what is your role? What is your role as a planning commissioner for the town of Alta? What do you think it is?
You're asking anybody.
Yeah, well, planning commissioners, because the mayor, John, and the Chris's can't answer. Or
Well, this is Rob, and I would just say that we are here to interpret the laws and the zoning of the town and apply them to all situations that arise.
good. What do you
I
think?
think we're the land use authority for the town.
And what does that land use authority mean to you?
Well, it's similar to what I think I'm just building on what Rob said. Knowing the ordinance and making decisions that fall within the direction of the ordinance.
Okay. And is it Maren? Maren, is that
Maren,
right?
yeah.
Maren.
Yeah, serving the town and applying those ordinances to the best use of the town and being a representative that way.
Okay. And what's your relationship with the city council? What's your legal relationship with the council?
We
Where
kind
are
of
you
serve as an advisory board in a way.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, so I think often, I mean, I can tell you what the law is, but it's interesting to see what people's perception is of what they actually do. So there's the state law, which sets up the parameters for what the planning commission can and can't do. And so you exist as a planning commission because the state has said every town and city has to have a planning commission. Planning commission can be one person. It can be 3 people, 5 people, 7 people, 100 people. It's set at the local level. you have Title 10, I think, of the Alta Code, which talks about land use. And there should be a section in there that's called Planning Commission Powers and Duties. And it should state exactly what you do and don't do. I kind of went through that a little bit last night, and I'm just gonna, just because this isn't really a test. It's not like you get a grade on this, but I was trying to decipher from your code what it is you actually do. And I want to see if anyone wants to take a stab on what actions you actually take, because you are right, under statute, you are an advisory body. Really, the only role given to you by the state is to recommend to the council. But in your case, in your code, it seems like it's a little bit different, that the council has decided to delegate some authority to you as the legislative body to take final action on some applications. So I wonder if you can tell me what you think those are, because it was a little, that's one of my suggestions I have for you, is to make that a little clearer in your code. Because there's a couple of sections, maybe 2 or 3, that talk about sort of who does what, but it's not very transparent or easy to find. So what do you guys take action on? So you all have been designated as a land use authority. And even on your website, I think it says the Planning Commission is designated as the land use authority and takes final action on all applications. So that's a very general statement, but what actually comes across your desk? Do you know what you're enabled to actually take final action on, and what that actually means when you do take final action? So I'll throw that back to you 3 to tell me.
Well, I'll chip in that I agree with Maren in that we are an advisory board to the town council, and I am really not sure, Roger, about any specific issues that we do separate from the town council. I may be missing that.
I think, Rob, in the past, I think when there's been let's say a variance or something that isn't by right in the ordinance, the planning commission has had to opine.
Yes, okay.
Could I throw something in here? I would like, and I'm not sure whether this is completely left field or not, I'd like to interpret the planning commission's role more broadly, using the, might say, the plain language interpretation of those words. That the planning commission, I would like to see charged with overall planning of the town of Alta. And that's, I don't think that's the way it's functioned yet.
Yeah.
So are you talking about the planning commission and the town council together?
Yes, I am. I mean, my feeling is this: we got a lot of brain power on the planning commission, and we got a lot of challenges for this town, and I'd like to have that brain power meet those challenges, and that's so that's I kind of feel that we're not making the full use of the brain power that's there, and I'm concerned that the planning commission is kind of too narrowly constrained by things like saying, well, we'll just deal with land use. I think the problems are more than land use, and the challenges are more than land use. But as I say, I may be completely off base here, just, talking from space. So I'll toss that over to Megan, to Meg, and ask her what she thinks.
Well, to bring the rocket scientist down to earth again, I'll say that we are constrained by state law, but at the same, so the state law says you have to have a planning commission. They're advice only unless the council delegates otherwise. So the council ultimately, at the end of the day, could delegate them to take actions outside of what their statutory duty from the state is, which is, hopefully you can see the screen.
Yes.
So that's from the state. So you make recommendations on zoning code amendments, general plan amendments, and then you're also supposed to recommend to the city council the who does what, like who approves what permit, who approves, what's the best process for appeals, what's the best process for variances. That's sort of the statutory thing. But then you have your own code, and I'm just going to jump around here for a second. You have your own code under Title 10, and again, this land use authority has designated the planning commission to take final action on conditional use permits, subdivisions, which is going to be a change because we have a new law that takes you out of that game, as well as the council. But it wasn't clear to me, and I know the Chris's and Polly and John know what you guys do, but it's not very self-evident when you look at your code. And I think my first recommendation, Mayor and Planning Commissioner, is and this is just going to go back to this, so this is what is off your website. It says the Planning Commission serves as the land use authority for the town of Alta. They will hear, review, and act on all land use applications and shall be final decision makers on applications. And I think one of the reasons, so the first thing I would say is it would be nice to clean up exactly, and this is a chart that a lot of other entities and towns and cities use. It's just simply a transparent chart of who does what. So right here, this just is an example, like D means decision maker, appeal is appeal authority. So it'd be nice for you all to know exactly what your job is and what you do approve and what your boundaries are. And then Mayor, to your point, you certainly can, if there was like a special project or if there's transportation issue or something that some kind of thing you wanted to assign to them, that's within your purview. But if again, it would only be under a recommending or advisory body. You would ultimately, as the council, make the final decision on that project or whatever it is that you gave to them. But in theory, the Planning Commission is supposed to be that long range, visionary kind of entity. I think things have shifted at the state level over the years to give the flexibility, especially to a town of your size, to figure out how do we manage these things that we have to do with very few people, what's best. And it says, Planning Commission, you figure that out. Are we lucky to have a clerk? Are we lucky to have the Chris's? Is there something they can administratively do? Can we focus on general plan or zoning amendments? Or can we focus on special planning area or something like that? What is it how do we best all serve the functions in our town? And that's certainly something to discuss. And then the council, you can recommend that to the council. Also, if you are mayor, if the council feels the same way about trying to relook at exactly who does what, you could certainly have a meeting together. And I know Chris is probably kicking me virtually under the table, but you could do a Planning Commission council meeting and kind of just hash that out and talk about that a little bit about that direction. But with that said, it seems to me, I mean, and I'm not, this is again a discussion. I'm trying to give you guys some value from my point of view to help you do your jobs better. Is it clear to you, David, Maren, and Rob, exactly what actions you take on what permits?
Well, is it clear what I mean, as Chris or was John are bringing things to the Planning Commission, and we discuss them and figure out whether or not that's appropriate to be handed off to the town council for approval. That's always the way I interpreted what we were doing.
So Meg, I will offer, to the planning commission, I will tell you that, if time had not been an issue, I was contemplating a project to like make a list of all the places in the code where the term planning commission appears, and you can go on our code, on our, the town code website, and Control F planning commission, and find somewhat efficiently, although it's a pretty long list, all of the specific authorities the planning commission has. So yeah, I think what Meg is getting at is that staff brings certain kinds of land use decisions, certain kinds of applications to the planning commission, and that's supposed to be governed by the code. So I think we've named a few. The planning commission has, has authority over certain aspects of zoning approvals in different zones. It's different in each zone. The planning commission does have authority on conditional use permits. So maybe as a follow-up to this, I will complete that project. I don't think Meg, intended to create a complete list there with her spreadsheet a slide ago.
Yeah, so this is actually from another entity.
Oh.
But something just like this, and the reason why this is helpful is one for planning commissioners, right? One for city council members. Everybody knows whose lane is what lane, because ultimately the city council designates this stuff. And I mean, I think it's great if the way I read your code, it sounds like they don't take final action on anything because they act as the appeal authority, and they can't take action on anything because everyone has the right to appeal a final decision at the local level, and you can set that up. And that's probably why I'm just guessing that's why that was done, because then you would need another appeal entity. But I also, it's not clear, do they do variances as well, the city council?
As the appeal authority, they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just gonna, it's not state law, but we recommend the councils don't get in that game. And can any of you wonder why we recommend that councils don't act as an appeal authority? Politics.
Yeah, they're elected.
Because those two areas of the law, and I am bouncing around here, and just if I'm, because again, if this is too unfocused for you, what I'm trying to get at is you're an advisory body. You need to have transparency in your code. You need to show who does what. And I feel like there are pieces there in the code just for me from the outside coming in, dropping in. And like if I was an Alta resident and I had wanted to do a permit, I was trying to figure out like who does what, right? And it's not self-evident. And so it's not this is indicative of a lot of codes, but a lot are moving toward that chart I just showed you, which is a super easy fix, because then it's like a one-stop shop. Like, oh, I have this permit, this is who I have to go to, and this is how I get it done. Because ultimately, you have the great broad authority to create the policy for how you want to develop in your town, right? Like you can set the parameters, but then once you set those parameters, you're basically administering. So it shouldn't be difficult for them to figure out how they get what you've already, how you get the permit once you've already decided the policy. And so that's sort of a lot of the impetus of these laws over the last few years, is to try to bring real clarity to codes, but retaining the local authority. As of today, we have another 2 days of the state legislative session. So we'll see what authorities remains on Friday, March 1st. But as of right now, you can still set the authority for what you want as far as laws for development and land use. And that's these lanes, which I have up on the chart here, which is what I call land use lanes. So legislative, administrative, quasi-judicial, big terms, but kind of straightforward concepts. Legislative, you're making policy. So that's why when you would recommend the planning commission on a new zone or an amendment to a zone or a general plan update, you as a planning commission have a process of holding a public hearing, taking public input, creating some kind of a recommendation, and then giving that up to the council, who can then decide what they want to do. They can reject it, they can amend it, they can adopt it. But that's the legislative lane. The administrative lane is what I was just talking about. Once you set that law, so for like conditional uses, you guys decided you wanted conditional uses. You set some standards for how to review that permit. And then it looks like the planning commission issues the permit. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So in other towns, conditional use permits, they've kind of done, and that's a unique animal. And I don't know how many conditional use permits you actually see. That's what I was trying to get at before. Like, what do you guys see come across your desk most as planning commissioners? What kind of application, or is it everything?
We have seen conditional use permits. We also have used the legislative lane that you're talking about to. We did some amendments maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Rob. I'm sure you remember that, where we were trying to clean up things like how do you measure building height, things of that nature. It was maybe not the concepts you're getting at, Meg, but it was some of the gray areas of some other, measuring tools and other such, type requirements.
Nice. Okay. So conditional use permits. Yeah. So what a lot of sort of communities are doing, and I know small towns have a challenge because you guys are, it's stretched of who does what. But when the state law kind of gave this flexibility, some commissions and some communities said, okay, look, we are spending way too much time on the size of a fence height and having endless meetings on this or that. We really need to be focused on updating our general plan, or we need to be doing something different. And they made a decision to say, look at conditional use permits, and they separate them out into what's called administrative and then ones that have review. So in other words, you could have a tiered system if you feel like, and this is all just, delegating to the overworked staff that you already have, or even finding one person. Land use authority could be one person, but taking kind of the ones that are more routine. And I know John does a lot of the building permit stuff, and so he's kind of acting in that way now, but a lot have said, take the stuff that's just administering the permit, that's kind of a check, 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 and farm that out to somebody else so we can focus on X, Y, or Z. Do you have that total flexibility? That slide I had back up, I had, let's see, this one, that's down. This one right here, one of your jobs under the state law is to recommend to the council who should be the appeal authority, who should be the land use authority, and it can be a variety of people, right? You can have several. So John is the land use authority that takes action on a final building permit, if that's the case, or whatever he is, if he stamps something at the end of the day. You guys could take it on a conditional use permit that had certain criteria that you needed to look at. Like, do you have to look at everything, I guess, is the point that I'm getting to. What is the most efficient use of your time, which is kind of what the mayor was getting to in a way. Like, what is the most efficient use of your time? What are you really there to do? What can you help with as the town struggles with some of these challenges? And so back to the legislative, administrative, quasi-judicial. Legislative, you're very limited as a planning commission because really your only job is to give advice. Make the hearing, give advice. When you're administrative, that's really where you can recommend different ways of how do we make this work for our town, given the limited resources, given these types of application come in, what's the most effective way to do it? But you're also bound by that law. Once you create it and you put it on the books, you have to follow that. So you have to follow that conditional use permit ordinance every time you look at a conditional use permit. You can go back and recommend that you change it, like you were saying, you changed heights or did something. So you have that ability. You just have a process to go through. You can't just do that in the meeting. You have to go back and amend the code. And then that final area I call the Judge Judy lane is the kind of like pretending to be a lawyer. You're in the appeal authority, quasi judicial area, which is very, very narrow. And that's why earlier, and that's variances and appeals. So varying your code and then appealing an action taken, a final action taken on your code. And the reason we don't recommend councils is because it is a very narrow area of law. You have certain criteria that you have to meet. And often councils do not have that objective lens. I'm not saying that all do, all don't, but very often the politics creep in and decisions are made that are probably not following the law. And of all the areas of law liability, although Alta is an outlier because you get sued a lot, quasi-judicial actions are the most liable to be sued on because they have such narrow criteria to be reviewed under. Does that make sense? In other words, here, when you're legislative or administrative, the state's giving you lots of authority to decide we want to have pink houses, green shutters, 5 trees, a fence. But once someone comes to amend or appeal your code, they're giving you very narrow criteria and they're asking you to kind of act like a judge and say, did they do this or did they do that? It's very black and white. It's not as gray or as policy induced or flexible as those other areas. And after an appeal decision is made, the applicant has a right to go to court. And so that's why it's again, a kind of very restrictive area as far as decisions made. Are you guys, the planning commissioners, are y'all probably familiar with this? You've heard this before. Does this make sense to you? Any questions?
So Megan.
Yeah.
I think what you've said here is that the planning commission is the appeal authority. Did I get that right?
No, so under your code, Mayor, you, the city council, are acting as the appeal authority, the
Okay.
legislative
All
body.
right.
And that's what again, it's not against the law. It's fine. You have that choice. We just have found in practice, councils aren't very good at being objective
Okay.
because you're elected.
It's certainly comforting to know that we're special because we get sued a lot.
And Mayor, it might be a little, we actually recently talked about changing that provision and the council adamantly did not want to change it.
Okay.
So if you remember a few months ago, I can't remember, Chris, I don't remember what month that was, but it was within the last 3 or 4 months.
July 2023.
And why was that? Just
No, it wasn't even that long ago.
It was July.
It was July? Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Anyway, why was that? Because
what
they
was their
felt
thinking?
like they were the elected officials and they wanted to, it was important for them to be involved with appeals. And, you know.
And way back when, Dave Church said, yeah, you're right, Meg, you're right. It's not against the law for the council to be the appeal authority. But it's not the best idea because they make the laws ultimately. So how can you appeal the laws that somebody made to the people who made the laws? But he said in little places like Alta, I mean, we don't have that big of a pool to draw from. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to get somebody to even run for the council. So he could understand why we would have the town council be the appeal authority because they're there, they're involved, they want to be there. And there just isn't that much of a draw for other people. So it does kind of make sense. It can be a little sticky, but they wanted to be involved and participating because they were there.
And I think that was the other part, was that Alta is such a unique place that they felt like if they delegated it to, I was recommending an ALJ, that person wouldn't understand the intricacies of the town of Alta.
But I think even that is like, sounds to me like a source of liability. Like, right, when we get into an appeal and there's a hearing, the intricacies aren't supposed to be, like, the appeal's not supposed to be decided on the intricacies of Alta. It's supposed to be decided on the code. Is that fair to say?
I would argue that, yeah. And like I said, again, it's a choice right now. Last year, they tried to remove the council as being the appeal authority and they being the state legislature. Nothing on the radar this year. I think that one's gone away for a while. But there is, so this was about, I think maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago now, where they made the change where an appeal authority can be one person. So like Polly was saying, the administrative law judge doesn't have to be a lawyer or anyone, but one good person who understands those criteria. A lot more communities are using that one person, kind of sharing them, but the problem for you would be money, but some are expensive, some aren't expensive. I think it's something just to sit on and think about if you ever get to that point, especially being so close to the valley. There's a lot of folks that are doing it now, serving as appeal authorities for municipalities. So I act as one for Morgan County, for North Ogden City. I live in Summit. And so the flip side of knowing the intricacies is that I can be a lot more objective and go in there and just be the bad person, because often appeals and variances, they're not very easy to grant, or they shouldn't be. And so I can be more of the enforcer. So totally just a sidebar discussion. You guys have made your decision. It is what it is. Just know that you have an option in the future if you decide to vary that, and as well as planning commission, sort of that's, you can ultimately make recommendations to the council, but again, they get paid the big money, so that's why they make the final decision.
Holly, how many appeals have we dealt with since you've been representing or assisting the town from a legal perspective? And then maybe it's to Roger with the.
I can't remember any.
I don't think we've had any appeals, but we do hear variances maybe every couple of years, and we did grant a variance to Alta to put Wiesen towers on slopes steeper than 30%.
Right.
And we did that, a couple kind of consecutive summers. I can't remember.
That as a recommendation, Chris, to the.
No, that goes to the town council because they're the appeal authority. So that's not a planning commission decision.
But the appeal authority can ask the planning commission for recommendations if they have a question and they want a little bit more depth on the matter. And another way the appeal authority, I don't know why the legislature does this, but it's kind of like the Board of Adjustment. That's the common old vernacular was Board of Adjustment. And I think we've had like 6 in 45 years. Maybe 7.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, when they all board, the reason they went to that flexibility was because, in small towns, particularly getting 7 or 5 people, it's like appointed for once every 2 years or something they have to be trained in. It was just really challenging. So, but it sounds like you guys have decided what you want. Just know there's other options as you proceed, or maybe it works with what you have. This is just a follow up on those legislative lanes, kind of again for planning commissioners understanding, you have the most flexibility when you're creating the law. You limit yourself. Once you decide what that is, you're bound to adhere to that. And then we talked about the quasi judicial. And then conversely, the applicant has the least rights at the legislative arena. When they come in for a rezone or something else, they're just asking. It's not something they have an expectation to be granted. But when you move into the administration, like the conditional use or the particularly even the variance is even more clear, but they have a right to rely on to be processed under that code if they need it or they don't need it. So those are just some of the overarching principles of when you move between items on an agenda. And I think I had here. Check it out. We had an idea. Oh, here it is. Oops. Oh, I did take it out. So, oh no. Yeah, I did take it out. But we had a sample agenda and I dropped it. Sorry, talking to myself. But one of the things some commissions do is administrative legislative. they put that on their agenda. And I had an example, but it's really easy. You just group it. So like, and it helps you as a planning commission understand I'm in this lane and then I'm moving to this lane. And it also helps the public. So what do I mean by that? So what if you hold a hearing to amend a zone? Well, you want everyone's thoughts and feelings and tears and emotions, right? But then when you move to the next item, which could be a conditional use permit, you don't, honestly, this isn't, you don't care about their feelings. You care about whether the application meets the code. And if they have any relevant information on your code standards that help you to approve or deny that permit, right? So you're in a very different mode, whereas often under conditional use permits, people are very emotional and have things they want to share or ideas. And that's really not the place for it. So just an idea, strategy wise, to think about using your agenda to group items if that's an issue for you. So something just to think about. The other thing I just wanted to pop up is this one that's up on the screen now, talking about the role of staff. And you said, staff brings you stuff. Well, yeah, they should, you're lucky to have them to do the analysis and kind of tell you what lane you're in. Administratively, you're checking off whether it meets the code or not. When they bring a policy item to you, when you're recommending to the council, really their role there is just to give advice, because there is no code, because you're making a new code, you're creating law, you're in the policy arena. So they could give bumpers on policy or fiscal input. But this is right from your code, saying that, use the town manager when you need to for advice. And then this was something that I found too that I don't know if this jives with other sections of the code, but it says in here that after you receive a land use application, you have a year to approve it. There are no time clocks currently except outside of building permits. And now there will be under subdivisions time clocks for permit review. So I'm not sure if you follow this or if you use this, but I just recommend taking any time limits out unless you stick to them. So in a year's, I've never seen a year. That's pretty good, pretty broad. Usually it's 30 days. So you may want to just look at that as you peruse through trying to maybe streamline the who does what, because really in government, we've traded efficiency for transparency. We're not efficient because we have hearings, we have minutes, we have steps, we have permits, but we are transparent in the sense that we hold open and public meetings, we hold public hearings. We're trying to make it clear to the applicant how they can do stuff in your town. I am over my 30 minutes. I can jump into some other items, but I want to leave you with these resources, and we can talk more if you have specific questions or if I have not been too clear about kind of your lane, your role, maybe some suggestions on how to clarify your code. These are other training resources. As towns, you're exempt from a lot of things. You're exempt from some general plan elements, specifically this moderate income housing element that you may hear about a lot if you attend any of the league events or any American Planning Association events. You're also exempt from the training requirement. All planning commissioners outside of towns are required to have 4 hours of training, but we always encourage you, and here are some resources. The Land Use Academy of Utah has an hour online little course you can take. It has videos on some certain topics. We just transferred that to the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman, and he's going to spit some new life into it and add more videos and more resources. There are conferences. The APA always does a planning commissioners track. And then there are other entities that are around for other resources, and then always ourselves, whatever we can do to help. But really that was what I wanted to impart today, was kind of, you have a good sense of what your role is. You have some difficult challenges. I think it's, time to have the conversation either amongst yourselves first or with the council if you suggest any changes or new directions as you guys proceed, or maybe everything's just fine as it is. But I think it's always worthwhile to have that conversation at the start of a year, and just take a checkpoint of where you're at and some kind of a work plan about, if you have some big ticket items that you want to accomplish. I find that to be successful. As far as, making things meet with the few resources that you have, you guys do a pretty incredible job. But just thinking about maybe are there certain things you can farm out that make it, or have one individual do something that helps take the workload off another. I'm not quite sure how that fits. Chris will get a better sense of that, and John, of course, has a sense of that. So that's my spiel. I'm certainly open to questions, comments, other directions.
Anybody have any questions there for Meg while she's here?
Well, I have a comment, namely that I've discovered that the league is an incredibly helpful source of information and assistance that helps certainly me and as far as I could tell, anybody who turns to them for just advice. And it's I didn't, when I got into this job, I had no appreciation for how rich that source is. So my thought is, when you have questions, go to Meg. If she doesn't have the answer, she'll tell you where to go.
Well, if she doesn't have the answer, there is no answer. But the other thing, I mean, there's a lot of great online resources at the league, so you don't even have to bother Meg every time you have a question. There's videos and presentations, and it really is a good source of information.
And Meg, one thing that might be helpful for the commission to hear, I'm just curious with your take, is, I've talked with Chris a little bit about the need to update the Alta land use code. And I'm curious if you thought that there were some things that needed to be updated as well. And of course, tied with that hand in hand is, before I'd want to do that, I would probably look for a general plan update. And does the league or you have a recommendation of how often a general plan should be revised?
Well, yeah, so some different thoughts on that. So the general plan is supposed to set the vision, and then the code implements that vision. And so often we find both are outmoded, and then which chicken is you hit first? Because general plan updates are big. And why are they big? Because it's the collective vision for the community. So think about how we would set a collective vision for the 10 of us that are on the call right now. So think about for the whole Alta community, given all the challenges you have. So there's a couple of ways to crack the egg. And sometimes I suggest, if there are really sections of the code that are just out of mode with state law or out of mode of what you do, like often I find that the practice is very different than the code. In other words, there's a way they did it and they do it, but it's not codified. And so and the resources are, you guys are in WFRC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a matching grant there, because the other thing is they're expensive. And there is a matching grant program that will assist you with the general plan and the code update. But maybe I would say, and maybe it's a good job for the planning commission, what I say is just like one time, try to take what comes before you and what's really broken in the code, like what's not working, and just punch list that out. And if those are easy fixes, fix that first before you attack the general plan. Do you know what I'm saying? You got to kind of look at your own goals and needs and budget, but sometimes those code fixes can be easier than amending the general plan that will take a year and a half, and then doing the code, which will take 2 years. But within 4 months, you could have updated the code parts that were broken and not working for you. So it's just kind of whatever's most effective. I found just brushing through your code, the conditional use permit section could really use some love, especially if you're doing those on a regular basis. There's no standards of review. So that might get you in trouble. And then just simply clarifying what it is the planning commission does. And what final action you take. Just that chart, which is kind of a no-brainer. Like Chris said, he could, maybe create that chart, and just plop it in the code, or just, you don't even have to codify it. It's just, it's available on the website or something. So I guess that's my first strike reaction. Maybe just clean up the things that you do on a daily basis. They're like, oh shoot, I wish this could have been, we should have changed that, or, that kind of thing.
Well, as usual, Meg, you bring a mountain of information for all of us to think about, and it's all has great value. The training stuff, yeah, the conditional use permit, I can see that raising up in front of us in the near future. But does anybody else have anything for Meg other than thank you very much for your time and all of your knowledge? Anybody?
Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, and I'll come back anytime. And if you need subdivision help with that process, let me know.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you guys for what you do. Nice to see you, John.
Thanks, Meg. Nice to see you. Sorry I was late getting in.
Bye.
So can we move on now to
UDOT.
UDOT and the 210, and it's James Olszewski? Did I say that right?
You're muted, James. Oh, there we go.
There we go. It's Olszewski, like an old chef on skis.
Olszewski. Perfecto. Great. Well, welcome in and give us your knowledge.
Okay, Chris, how do you want to go about doing this?
So I have that graphic that I guess we got the data from Devin Weeder, but in our meeting we had a kind of a pre-meeting last week with the forest and UDOT and a few of us from the town to talk about this subject. And yeah, so I shared in that group, James, I shared that like a graphic, and I have kind of a polished out version of that I think it makes sense just to share my screen, and I'll just put it up on the screen, and we can scroll around it as needed or as people have questions.
No, that's perfect. So let's start with that. So if I may, so I've got Mike Nadu here with me. He's the surveyor in the company who actually performed the survey for SR 210 all the way from the mouth of the canyon all the way to the top of Alta. The survey was performed in an intent to do two things. One is to establish the right-of-way for the entire canyon, as well as to work then with both FHWA, Federal Highway Association, and then the Forest Service on perfecting an easement to UDOT for its right-of-way. So that was the ultimate plan. We have since then completed the survey. We have completed the easement. It has been filed with Federal Highways, and to my knowledge, it was approved by Federal Highways. And the record of survey for the survey work is also of record in the Salt Lake County Surveyor's Office. So we established where we believe the right-of-way is today. We did not clear up any ownership up and down the canyon. We just showed what the right-of-way was based on historical use and what had been previously monumented. So with that, let's start with asking questions, and then I can explain further what we did or didn't do, because I don't think you care about how we did the survey. I think it's more about the results and what the impacts are.
Well, I would just ask, what is, this is, pretty basic. What is the actual width of this road that we're talking about? And is that uniform all the way up and down?
It is not. There is not a constant, 66 foot wide right of way like you would have in a city street, given the nature of the canyon, especially where we have winding roads in some areas and we have parking and additional needs for the department, snow removal, snow storage, maintenance facilities. The right of way, it's not straight lines and it's not a common offset from the center of the road either. So the maps we have followed, you can actually see on the screen, you can see where it's kind of a jigsaw puzzle in some regard, but it matches up nicely with federal highways and with the Forest Service. And so we did clear up some of the issues that we had between them. And we all have a nice common boundary that they do recognize now. They're not this drawing, but the record of survey actually shows all the offsets that we have up and down the corridor. So if you want to get knee deep into the specific offsets, that we can do. And there is another document that we can send you as well for the entire canyon, if that would be helpful.
Well, let's start with describing what are the purple lines? These are not exactly property boundaries, correct?
They are property boundaries,
Oh,
Mayor.
they are. Okay.
Yeah, so I initially wanted to provide an exhibit that had all the property boundaries in town, ski area special use permit, some other data. But GIS data does not always, in fact, it often doesn't kind of line up with itself, like individual data sets don't line up. That's especially the case up here in the canyon. But the purple lines this represents survey data collected by the BLM in 2015 as part of the conveyance to the town of National Forest System land. So Congress passed a bill in 2014 or 2015 to convey land to the town. And that's why we have land under our buildings. You can see this parcel under my cursor here with the town office in Alta Central. This is our vacant parcel in the North Flagstaff parking lot, 1.3 acres, if I'm right about that, John.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, and then 0.6 acres or something under the community center that Molly and I are in right now. And a decent looking parcel up by the water building. I don't remember the acreage there. So as part of that survey work, I don't know why necessarily, but the BLM surveyed various private parcels through the center of town here. The gold miners, the Deep Powder House, the Alpha Lodge, Shalashaft, Photo House, Rustler, and Snow Pine. So we just happen to have that in one nice piece of GIS data, one shapefile, and it happens to, for purposes of presentation and visualization, line up really well with this right-of-way data from UDOT. So I thought for the purpose of talking, really, we're mostly talking about the center of town. There are some places in West Alta where our parcel data looks pretty messy when you overlay it on this new right-of-way graphic. So I just didn't want to get into that. I think what people's interest right now is primarily like the center of town, what is where. And I will say, I think it's an interesting part of the Alta mindset over the years and the decades that leads people not to think about property boundaries very much. It's just a cool part of the nature of this place. It's an open environment, but there are property boundaries out there, for us to consider when we're making decisions about the future.
Chris, you showed us the pretty picture because I was gonna, it does look like I guess let's say the black line type there that's the right of way designation.
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Yep. So they feather in pretty nice. So we'll stay away from it West Alta then. But for the UDOT guys, where exactly does it end? Can you pan up to the end of where does the Highway 210 actually end?
Albion Basin.
All the way up. So that there's that goes all the way up into Albion Basin.
Just the pavement, just the end of it.
Yeah, to the end of the pavement to where the gate
Okay,
is.
not to Albion Basin, just to.
I'm sorry, just to the gate.
Okay.
And then it goes all the way down to the mouth of the canyon.
Yep, and James, it does look like when you get west of Alta, well, when you get west of the Wildcat, and I hope I'm not making anybody nauseous, kind of scrolling around at will. I'm a little nauseous, but
It helps, Chris, it helps.
oh, good. Yeah, just look out the window, and so right around the top of the Wildcat ramp, we do start to get towards that 66-foot dimension, and it's obviously it's not quite straight and narrow, but lower in the canyon it's much more consistent lower in the canyon, isn't that right?
That is correct. Once you get outside of the town and once you even get down past Solitude, or excuse me, not Solitude, Snowbird, the width is very, very consistent down to the mouth of the canyon.
Yeah. Just kind of
And even
scrolling.
through the bypass road, for the most part, it was pretty consistent. There's a couple areas where it jogs back and forth, but the property boundaries allowed us to have a consistent boundary where possible.
Yeah.
And our survey does include the bypass road as well, just so that we didn't leave that part off.
Okay, I was going to ask you that. So as part of this project, you did resurvey the bypass road.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Cool.
How do you guys deal with parking? Sorry to throw a landmine out, but how do you deal with parking, and is there a certain areas that aren't wide enough it's not allowed, or there's, how do you guys approach that? It's such a sticky issue.
So Dave, you're going to hate me for my answer. That's not my department.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I mean, Devin, who has been on the call, who was supposed to be, he is the one who manages that part as far as where parking is or isn't allowed and how that plays out. But in general, we want to coordinate and work with the town of Alta. So we don't want to be the heavy policeman. We want to do what's best and what's in the best interest for both. Obviously, what we need to make sure is that we can run our plows up and down the canyon in the wintertime, and that we don't have a problem with that. Beyond that, it's honestly what's in the best interest for both of us. So what can we do to make that work?
That makes sense.
Well, here's a weird question. If you go to the fire station, Chris can do this, and if you look at the parking area just east of the fire station, all those cars are on DOT right away. How does that jive with the Forest Service permit system through the ski area for reserved parking?
I don't remember what we decided right there.
So I'm trying to remember how we coordinated that effort with Lance in the Forest Service. I wanted to say that it was allowed as long as the town of Alta and UDOT had agreed to where that parking would be, and it was outside of the striping of the roadway so that the safety could be implied. And if that's not what you guys need or want, then that's something I guess we would look at and figure out what needs to change.
Well, and the other issue was the Forest Service didn't want the parking to get bigger, right? Sometimes people park their vehicles and it pushes dirt off and the parking area starts to get bigger and bigger over time. The Forest Service very much wants to not have that happen up either one of these canyons.
And that's my recollection too, from when we were talking about doing the parking, the reserve parking, that was something that both UDOT and the Forest Service agreed to.
And I would just chime in to muddy the waters a little bit more, that like every little chunk of parking in the highway corridor here, almost every single one has a different setup. There's different land ownership. This parking east of the firehouse that is on the UDOT right away, but we have it's not on the special use permit. So the ski area special use permit crosses the pavement, basically parallels the Snow Pine property, and it crosses the pavement right here. So the ski area permit takes in all this asphalt to the east of the Snow Pine. So this parking here, and I don't think this may not be quite, my cursor might not quite be settled on the special use permit boundary, but the town has a special use permit from the forest and permission from UDOT to operate our permit parking program in this parking area. And that's just, that's a circumstance here, but it's a different setup down here on the south side of the road. This is in the ski area special use permit, so that's up to the ski area and the forest. the town owns this land, so we don't need a permit from anybody. And then there's some additional asphalt here that it's on forest, but it's also in the right of way, so we get permission from both the forest and UDOT to manage our permit parking program there.
And then down canyon from the powder house on the road.
Yeah, that we do have a special use permit and permission from UDOT, explicit permission from UDOT to include that in the permit and reservation program. That zone is a little bit of a gray area, Rob. It's it's roadside, it's right on the permit boundary. But the status quo is that that's in the town's special use permit area.
Well, I don't know. It seems like a mess to me.
It's a huge mess.
Um,
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I will say, I think we've helped clean some of it up. So, I mean, is there still a lot more that can be done? Yes, but I think if nothing else, we've identified this is where the Forest Service, Federal Highways, and UDOT all recognize the right of way to be. Now the question is, what transportation or planning do you want to incorporate inside of it now? And at least we have a starting place to then operate from.
I was going to mention sort of a thank you for that, because I think we've been wallowing in sort of lack of clarity, what about how to proceed with trying to grapple with parking. So I think this at least sort of sets it up that we can make decisions or talk about things in a way that at least it's recorded. Let's say that where the right of way is and where private property is and where is Forest Service land, and there's an actual end of the road and all kinds of stuff. So I think that really sets us up to grapple with a difficult problem. May not be any better, but certainly at least it'll be more clear about where the right of way is.
And I agree with Dave. I'm thankful that UDOT is doing all the work to help us clarify this stuff as best they can do.
So this is pretty new, right? Because before this, the DOT stopped at entry 4, and then Chris Colley was involved heavily with the DOT and others figuring out some kind of strange easement situation instead of a right of way. So this is now just a set in stone DOT easement.
Well, help me understand, John, because the right of way is an easement and it is perfected with federal highways.
I think what John just means to describe is that, like, prior to your project, James, there were no line, there was nothing perfected or recorded.
That is correct.
But now there is.
That is, yes, to both.
Yeah.
Yeah, before there was a lot of ambiguity, a lot of uncertainty. This GIS map that you're seeing now was 10 times worse. It was a jigsaw puzzle that did not come together. But since that, we've been able to clear up, and now it's reported with the county. So they've been adjusting their parcel maps, which has cleaned some of this up as well.
Great.
Okay, and that was kind of my question too. So so there's no other process after this. This is kind of perfected, and now this is going to be the standard by which we evaluate where the right of way is. Is that correct?
Yes, on where you want to go next, what your next issue is, your next planning, transportation needs. This is ground zero, if you will, of where to begin and go from there.
Yep. Cool.
That's great. That's great information. We need that going forward. Anybody else for James?
Well, what are the implications of these right of ways on parking? And for instance, let's say from this little 210 rectangle, more or less in the middle of the screen, and to the north of that, along that side, there's a good deal of space, you might say, between the pavement and the right of way. Right, yeah, right along there where Chris is indicating. So how, tell me how that comports with or influences what parking rights or non-rights are in that vicinity, as an example.
Well, I would make the argument, it's not necessarily so much a right as how does UDOT and the town of Alta want to maintain and control that? Where do you
Okay.
want to allow parking and where don't you want to allow parking? And then we would partner together to do that. But the public does not get an inherent right to park where they want outside of the striping. So now it's a management thing. Where do you want to allow? Where don't you want to allow? And we would work together to make that a reality.
So
And
one
Roger-
thing, one thing is a little bit news to me. We're doing the same thing in Big Conwood Canyon as well. And I actually went out with UDOT maintenance and we went through the entire canyon of Big Conwood Canyon, which is a little bit bigger than Little Conwood Canyon, right? I think by like 7 miles longer, if I remember right. And it really opened my eyes because UDOT maintenance then were telling me, hey, we need this area because our snow plows are going to come through here. And so that was one thing that really resonated with me, is the fact that these snow plows need to get through there. And so if you have some public people parking their cars out there in the right of way, they could easily get smashed by a snow plow in the wintertime. So we got to think about the maintenance of the highway too.
But I think, Roger, I think the high level answer to your question is that parking within the easement is by permission. So, we need to work with UDOT and the forest in order for parking to occur within the easement, and we do. We have permits or permission for this parking here. It also applies to some parking that occurs kind of just west of the dumpsters, and then again, like between the grader here, UDOT road grader, and the bus shelter emeritus. And there are other sort of chunks of parking, and I would also add that like this is a GIS graphic for visualization purposes. These lines may not be like, if we were going to go out and find survey monuments for each of these corners and however else, the survey data is indicated on the ground, they may not appear exactly where this graphic makes them look like. So FYI.
Well, my comment about a mess had nothing to do with UDOT. It had to do with the parking. And I mean, I don't know, is the town still selling parking spots? Is the lift company taking over all the parking spots? That to me, it was the mess that I was talking about.
Same mess that we haven't. Well, I mean, it's a mess, but it's functional for the time being. We know more about, the project to develop the permit and reservation program, I think, taught us more about land ownership and jurisdiction in the highway corridor than any other process that I've been involved in at the town. And it is true that the ski area controls the vast majority of what we consider public parking in Alta and their special use permit. So that hasn't changed, but it has been clarified, and that's helpful.
Rob, I had the same reaction, but I think what I'm here, as I asked people, whether it's the town cops or whatever, I think they're grateful to have a system. So that seems to be the success part of that. It does seem a little unique to have the ski area control that per se, but maybe there's some refinement, or maybe that's the best system. I don't know. I think just having this idea of this right of way and the established, then it kind of we know who to coordinate with and ask or get the permits from, or is it the town's ground to do with what they would like. So
I guess there's another set of boundaries here that are not evident, and that is the boundaries on the special use permit.
Yeah, that's right, Roger. And this may not be super helpful, but what I'm going to tell you is that the special use permit takes in essentially all the land south of the easement, starting at a point kind of on the west side. It basically takes in the Wildcat parking lot, and then all the land south of the easement. It surrounds the hotel properties. It includes all this asphalt up here on the Rustler mine dump, so-called. It surrounds the Rustler and the Snow Pine. And then, like I was describing before, it crosses Highway 210, and the special use permit takes in almost all of this paved area up through town here. And, you know, I don't actually remember whether it takes in the Summer Road. Yeah, I don't remember that. But for our, you know, planning purposes, thinking about the center of town, yeah, pretty much all the land south of Highway 210 and surrounding the hotel properties is on the ski area special use permit. And all of this parking up here is on the easement. And not to get into a complicated or tricky subject, but the highway and the special use permit are one and the same east of the Snow Pine.
Chris, how long has that been that way?
I think we've all considered the highway to go to the end of the road. But it became to the end of the pavement, but it was no longer a matter of argument when this easement was perfected a couple years ago.
But the special use permit for the ski area was always that way?
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Wasn't always paved up there, but I don't know when it changed. I mean, it's certainly been that way for 20 years.
Well, okay. What else we got from James or for James?
How else can I help you?
Well, James, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about, you know, this project and how it differed from other like right-of-way perfection projects, and maybe it didn't from your perspective, but I mean, I guess I would just start by saying that it was really it was a nice opportunity to be able to work with you. The ski area and the town work pretty closely with UDOT and the forest to draw these lines. And I think, you know, some of this sort of sawtooth action up through here was maybe not the state's preference, but from my perspective, this makes it much easier for us locally to know who we have to work with. There's no question. Pretty much if there's pavement and it's not private property, ski area special use permit, or town property, it's all UDOT. So that's way better for us than like this little chunk of asphalt right here, for instance, not being in the highway. And this one up here, east of the post office not being in the highway. So I really appreciated being able to work with you guys on that. So thanks.
No, absolutely. And you're welcome. And it was honestly a pleasure to work with you guys as well. The one difference, if you will, on this project from most that UDOT would do is normally when we perfect right away, we also acquire what we need for the boundaries as well. And that's the one difference we did not do here. UDOT has a mandate to own and fee, either by easement or literally by warranty deed or quitclaim deed. And we did not pursue that action in this canyon at all. So that's the only thing we did differently. Otherwise, the survey work, the documents, the deeds, the descriptions, everything else that we did is 100% in accordance with what UDOT's surveying and right-of-way policies always have been. So, but your help in knowing where the special use permits are and the boundaries, that aided us, which made a big help. And with the Forest Service and Federal Highways, it made that process smooth. Because like I said, usually it takes a long time to get their approvals, and it went pretty fast. So I'm very grateful. So thank you for letting me be a part of this as well.
So James, if you had done what is normally the case, which is to acquire property to for the purpose of the right of way, where would you have done that here?
There's a couple encroachments that are up and down the corridor where we have land use that is happening inside of the right of way. We would have cleared that out by fee title or by easement. And it wasn't practical in this. Well, number one, we didn't have the budget for it, and that wasn't the overall purpose of this particular project. But usually that is the number one thing UDOT does, is make sure we don't have any encroachments, and that we either have an established boundary, which we do now, and then we own it in fee. And in this case, the fee would be a perpetual easement from federal highways, which we did receive.
And isn't it basically the case, James, that like for our purposes, that's not super relevant for the town's purposes. In order for us to do anything on the roadway, we need to talk to UDOT. And for some things, we need to talk to the forest, but our first stop's always going to be UDOT.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Well, I would just say thank you again to UDOT and to Chris. You guys collaborating and putting this thing together is very helpful for the Planning Commission going forward. Can we those poor guys had to listen through the whole League of Cities and Towns. Can we let them go now or what? Anybody got any questions?
So listening to that was awesome. Don't get me wrong. So we actually learned a lot. So that actually was great for us. So thank you for letting us be a part of that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Shall we move on to point 5? Possible future chair and vice chair. Thank you, UDOT.
Thank you.
Mr. Temporary Chair, I think it might make sense just to decline to take action on this. I know that's not, well, maybe we ought to take some input from Polly, but with our current chair and vice chair here and only 3/5 of the body, from my perspective, it makes sense to postpone until we have more attendance.
I agree. I agree completely.
Okay,
I don't see an issue with that.
great.
Okay. How about a meeting schedule? Anybody? Bueller.
So, if I may, so the Planning Commission has in the past sometimes adopted annual meeting schedules, and we've been meeting, I think we used to meet like some time ago, moons and moons ago, on the third Tuesday. But recently, and probably not that recently, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we changed to the fourth Tuesday. So we used to adopt a meeting schedule to affect that. But as we've all experienced, sometimes the business can be a little hot and cold for the Planning Commission. We don't like pure applications, or do projects to update ordinances all the time. So when we do, sometimes it's, we're in the thick of it for months or years. But it doesn't always happen. And our policy has generally been that when there's no meeting, we don't have a planning, or when there's no business before the commission, urgent business, we don't have a meeting. I think we're going to be busy this year. And so while I don't think in speaking with our legal counsel about this, I don't think we actually are required to have regular meetings. And if we don't have regular meetings, we're not required to adopt a schedule. However, I'd like to propose we adopt this schedule. Like I said, it's been a few years since we have. The question, well, that's question number 1, is whether to do that. Question number 2 is what you all would think about changing our meeting convention to the 4th Wednesday of the month. And there's some minor internal efficiencies for us on staff if we have a Wednesday meeting instead of a Tuesday meeting.
That's not a problem for me at all, but I would defer to the working stiffs.
Yeah, Wednesday is fine for me. That works with my schedule.
Chris,
Dave?
let's see, we're starting that. Then March.
Yeah, right. And I know that like February 28th is tomorrow, and we're actually meeting today. So if that like sort of warps your space-time continuum, I apologize. But yeah, that's when we would start.
To March, I guess, and that's
Yeah.
when that starts.
Yep.
See.
That would be the plan.
So
And-
skip March and go to a Wednesday in April. Is that where we are?
Well, have we decided? I don't know that we've decided to skip March. Was that proposed?
I may have not been listening.
I think we just Dave just recommended we start in March.
Well, it was just,
Okay, great.
we're doing the 28th today, and then March
Yeah.
is the first time we actually will shift to a Wednesday, if I understood that right.
Right.
And so I'm looking at the 27th, looks good. It's just working out. It looks like I have a meeting that occurs every other Wednesday. But it appears that we're somehow coordinated, so the universe is aligned.
And Chris, just to, clarify something, there's no requirement for a planning commission to have a meeting if there is no business. However, I'm just trying to find the actual code section, but my understanding is that for a planning commission, any any public body needs to adopt a annual meeting schedule so that the public has an idea of when to expect a meeting if one is going to occur.
Cool.
Holly, can I ask a question?
I will.
If we adopt, I think I did. If we do adopt a schedule and we don't hold a meeting, do we have to post a cancellation of the meeting? Or only is that if we post an agenda for the meeting first?
No, it's probably a good idea to just post a cancellation. But I think that's pretty easy to do, right?
Can you?
Okay, so we're looking at the 27th of March, correct?
Yeah.
And 3 p.m. I have a meeting at 7 p.m. that night, so 3 p.m. we can do.
Yeah. I think that works for me. I think that sounds good.
Okay, now do we want to move April, May, and on like the schedule I'm looking at? Want to adopt that, or do we want to do it a meeting by meeting?
Well, I think what we ought to do is just adopt this schedule as the schedule. And I tried to make all of these align with the actual dates on the calendar. But I can certainly double check. But I do think the planning commission needs to pass a motion to adopt a schedule, right, Polly?
Yeah.
Chris, you're hurting cats here, but without the chair and the vice chair, did they give you any feedback on the Wednesday? You asked me, I think, a while back about the Wednesday thing, so I didn't know if you had an informal poll going or how we.
I did discuss it with John Nepstad. I don't believe I've discussed it with Jeff. But we could amend the schedule. If it's not going to work out. And like Polly said, I think we can cancel meetings. We do it all the time. So.
Okay, so we need a motion to adopt this schedule for right now.
Yep, I can motion to adopt the schedule for now.
Thank you. Oh, can I second that? I'll second that motion.
Does this get posted on the website, or how does this get communicated to the community?
Yeah, post it on the website. I think that's like the requirement, basically.
Sorry, Rob, I interrupted your flow.
Well, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, stop sharing.
All right, all opposed, no. Okay, it's a done deal.
Hey, Rob, can I,
There's one other thing, Chris. You want to talk about the meetings?
oh, well, I guess we
What?
do have to talk about the date of the next meeting. But I just wanted to make one more, comment.
Okay, well, I was gonna, I was gonna ask you
Okay.
to introduce Chris Otto
Yes.
to everybody. And I've never met him and would look forward to meeting him, but, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. My name's Chris Otto. I've been here just a little over 2 months now. Just kind of learning everything about what you guys do. Thank you for letting me attend and listen into these meetings. It's been very helpful going back and looking at past meeting minute notes and just trying to get a real good sense of what the commission does. Looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, so in 25 words or less, give us your history.
I started out working with the Legislative Auditor General's office after I completed a master's in public administration, and have worked in a number of state and county organizations over the years, and spent a little time in Washington. Yeah, that's maybe 25 words, but that's about it.
But you're a Utah boy,
I know I'm from Minnesota originally.
but you're a skier.
That's true. Yes. Not a
Beautiful.
good one, but I try.
Beautiful. You qualify.
Yes.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. That's all I had to say.
Okay, I guess can I have a motion to adjourn?
You establish the date for the next meeting?
Did we establish, by the way, that the next meeting is on March 27th?
March 27 at 3 p.m.
Thumbs up.
Not tomorrow at 3 p.m.
No.
No. Oh, no, I really
I couldn't
definitely
resist.
amend the schedule before I post it. Thank you, John, for that. Oh, my God.
Okay. May I make a motion to adjourn?
I will second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
That's a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I will see all of you on the 27th.
Great job, Rob. Thank
There
you.
we go.
Hot dog. Nice to see you all.
See you guys.
See ya.
Good to see you.